What is up, guys? We're finally back here at Fist First. We got a UFC fight night to preview on this show. Guys, stay tuned.
But you got to be ready for that. But it's no
And what is up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Fist First. As always, guys, I'm your host, Steve, and we are streaming here on DSM Media's YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Guys, please do not forget to hit that like, follow, subscribe button. That will help us out tremendously. Now, we are back here after about a week or so. Had another little mini vacay, but I am excited to jump back into this. And we got an exciting month coming up. And it starts here with of a UFC fight night this upcoming Saturday. Now, the UFC is really starting to make some tremendous cards. Now our fight nights are starting to get stacked. But before we jump into that, as always, I'm going to break down a little bit of the UFC recent news, especially some that I've missed the past week or so. So first and foremost, UFC 283 just got another booking. Again, that is UFC 283 in January in Brazil. We got Neil Magny taking on Gilbert Burns. To be honest, guys, I think this is a huge fight. This is a huge booking for the UFC. At first glance, I was like, all right. Not a bad booking, but not a fight necessarily that I wanted to see. But then I dug deeper into it, and it's actually kind of a huge fight for both these guys here. Obviously, you got Burns kind of fluctuating in the top of that division, looking for a title shot. I don't know if he's going to get one if he beats Neil Magny, but it's going to help his case. And then you got Neil Magny looking to crack into the top 10 there. And that will definitely happen with a win over Gilbert Burns in January. So we will see how that fight does play out. Now, another announcement, not necessarily official announcement, not yet confirmed, but according to multiple sources, Aljamain Sterling is set to defend his belt against the returning Henry Cejudo. Now, apparently that is a done deal. Again, though, it is not official yet. It's not been officially announced. That is going to be a heck of a fight. And even though this was supposed to be O'Malley's fight, the UFC has told Sean O'Malley that he is fighting for the belt next. I guess that's whether it's Sterling or Cejudo, if these rumors and sources are correct. Now, probably the biggest news, I would say, maybe of the year, just recently happened. Yuri Prochazka has vacated his light heavyweight title due to a pretty serious shoulder injury in training camp. Dana White did say this was the worst shoulder injury the UFC has seen. This is huge news. This has huge implications for the light heavyweight division. I feel so bad for Prochazka. He's going to be upwards towards a year, but he has been promised a title shot immediately following his return. Now, who that's going to be against, like I said, this has major implications on that division because now this upcoming UFC pay-per-view in a week and a half's time, originally slated to be the light heavyweight title match between Teixeira and Prochazka, is now Jan Blachowicz taking on Magomed Ankalaev for that vacant light heavyweight title. Now, I'm a little surprised here that Glover Teixeira isn't involved in this fight. Now, apparently, the UFC did reach out to him. Glover Teixeira wanted to fight Jan Blachowicz for the vacant belt, which would have made more sense considering Blachowicz is ranked higher than Ankalaev. But the UFC wanted Magomed to fight. Glover Teixeira said he needed a little bit more time to prepare for that. So UFC strips him of his opportunity, and now your main event for UFC 282 is Jan Blachowicz, Magomed Ankalaev for that vacant light heavyweight title. It's a shame. It's a shame for Teixeira. It's a shame for Prochazka. It's a shame for the fans. But my prayers and thoughts go out to Prochazka. Hopefully, he can make a speedy recovery and come back. Hopefully, less than a year, and hopefully get that belt back because he worked hard. He deserves that belt. And to be honest, I'm not really looking forward to that main event come a week and a half, but it should still be interesting. Now, some more pretty big news around here, even though this was expected. Nate Diaz is officially released from the UFC. Now, what is next for Nate? I know I talked about this in a previous show, but I'm really curious to see what is next for him. Obviously, he is trying to make his own fighting promotion in Real Fight Incorporated. Will we see that soon? Is he going to go box Jake Paul? Jake Paul already shouted that out. Already came out, Nate Diaz. I also heard recently that a UFC return is a potential. The only way that would be is with a rematch versus Conor McGregor. I don't necessarily think that's going to happen. I think the boxing match versus Jake Paul is pretty more likely, I would say. But a rematch versus McGregor in the UFC is an open possibility. So we will see within the next couple months, maybe next couple weeks, what Nate Diaz plans to do after officially being released. He's a free man. Now, last bit of news here. This isn't really news. This is more just something that I find silly. Bilal Muhammad, coming off of that big win versus Sean Brady a couple weeks ago, has come out and said that Kamaru Usman does not deserve the rematch versus Leon Edwards. I'm sorry, Bilal, but this is just silly. It's a silly comment. It really is, right? Kamaru Usman was the pound for pound king. You know, Usman was probably one of the greatest, if not the greatest welterweight champions, probably the greatest. He loses the belt off a mistake, and Bilal Muhammad wants to come out and say he doesn't deserve a rematch. That's just silly talk. I don't really see where Bilal Muhammad's coming from there. Just really silly talk by Bilal. Felt like I had to mention that because I just don't see any logic behind it. But anyway, as I said, we do have a UFC card to break down. This is a UFC fight night taking place in Orlando this Saturday. And like I said, the UFC made a banger of a fight night. And to start us off here, I'm going to get into some notable prelims. Now, usually for these fight nights, I really haven't been doing the prelims. But like I said, this one's a banger of a card, so I felt like there's a few I had to mention. The first one here being Marcelo Rojo taking on Francis the Fire Marshall. Now, Francis Marshall, this is his UFC debut. And I do believe he is the favorite there on DraftKings in his debut. Now, this is a fight of striking versus wrestling. I do believe Marcelo Rojo is the better striker. I think Marcelo Rojo does need to put on that pressure early with that striking advantage because the longer this fight goes, the more it favors Francis Marshall in his wrestling ability. So how much will Francis Marshall's wrestling come into play here? I think it's going to come in tremendously. I think he's going to have a huge advantage in this fight due to the wrestling capability. If Marshall can withstand Rojo's early pressure, which I think we're going to see, he's going to be able to take Rojo to the ground. He's going to be able to secure this win, whether it be admission or decision. I think Francis the Fire Marshall is going to come away with his first win in the UFC in his debut. But again, that is a fight to watch, especially with this up-and-comer Francis Marshall. Really curious to see how he gets familiar with the UFC octagon. Next fight here I want to mention is Clay Guida taking on Scott Holtzman. And how can you not be excited for a Clay Guida fight? Dude does not know how to not put on a show. Dude's an animal. Dude's fun to watch. Also, this fight has the potential to be an absolute slugfest. Granted, both these guys are old, so it could be a slow-moving slugfest, but it does have that slugfest potential. Potentially one of the better fights of the prelims, in my opinion. Again, though, I do think this is a battle between striking and wrestling, right? Guida, I do believe, has the advantage in wrestling, right? Scott Holtzman has shown vulnerability to that aspect of his game. So will Clay Guida try to take this fight to the ground? I think that is likely because I do think it's also likely for Holtzman to annihilate Guida on the feet. So I think this fight really comes down to, can Clay Guida effectively take Holtzman down? I think he does. Now, with that being said, is Clay Guida going to try to take him down, right? I think both of these guys want to put on a performance. Both these guys have been in the sport for a long time. They're going to want to try to put on a good performance for these fans. So who knows? Maybe Guida stands on his feet, and if he does, this is going to be a slugfest. And if that's the case, I think Scott Holtzman is going to come out on top. But that all depends on what Clay Guida we see going into this fight. Now, moving on here, this is the last of my notable prelims. Phil Rowe versus Nico Price. I had to mention this because of Nico Price's fun fight capability, especially in this fight here against Phil Rowe. This could be an absolute brawl as well. Although I think this is a brawl that we could see end fairly quickly. I think Nico Price has a little bit of an advantage. I think he's an overall better fighter, especially in the striking department. I think Nico Price is tougher. So although this could be an absolute brawl, this is kind of like my honorable mention of the prelims because this one has that capability to definitely end probably in the first round. We could see a Nico Price first round knockout, but we will see. That is going to be another exciting fight nonetheless. Now, to get into the main card, and I am very, very excited for this main card. We got an absolute banger of a main card, and I got a lot of bets I already placed, riding into this card. So hopefully this main card can make me some money. First fight of the main card. We got the athletic beast Eric Anders taking on Kyle Dacus. Now, what's funny about this is you look at these two guys, right? You look at their bodies, and you're like, okay, Eric Anders should annihilate Kyle Dacus. And that's what's funny about the UFC is you cannot pick fighters, you cannot pick winners based on looks. Because if you did that, Eric Anders would destroy Kyle Dacus. Eric Anders is an athletic beast. He's a freak. Kyle Dacus is not. But that does not correlate with skill. This is going to be a competitive fight nonetheless. A competitive fight, though, which I do believe Kyle Dacus does have the advantage. Now, that being said, one thing I want to say about Eric Anders is this man has power, right? You look at his body, dude's a freak, and he's no joke. He has power. He has heavy, heavy hands, especially his left. But he fails to use his hands as an advantage, right? He tends to take fights to the ground more often than you would think, right? If you're a guy with power, you expect him to be throwing, you expect him to be in a brawl, but he does not use that. And I think that plays, into his IQ. I even blame some of his coaches. He has yet to utilize his power to his advantage. Now, if Eric Anders can do that in this fight, there's a good chance he'll get the win. Now, that being said, Kyle Dacus, on the other end, is a very well-rounded fighter. He might not have heavy hands. He may not have the advantage in the striking department. But Kyle Dacus is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He is a great fighter, but he's another guy that just can't seem to crack it in the UFC, right? So both these guys have the talent. Anders in the power, I should say. Dacus in the talent. But neither guys have been able to really prove that as of recent. So with that being said, this is a 50-50 fight in my opinion. This could be a competitive stand-up brawl, which I think would favor Anders if he uses that power, if he utilizes that power. The stand-up game would favor Eric Anders. On the other hand, this fight could go to the ground, which I think extremely, extremely favors Kyle Daukaus. And if that happens, it would probably just be Kyle Daukaus wearing Eric Anders out on the ground, which could make for a boring fight. And I think I have it here on my notes. I really do believe the first 3 minutes of this fight is going to decide what kind of fight this is going to be. If Eric Anders can land like one or two power shots to Daukaus early, it's going to be a boring fight unless he knocks him out with those power shots. It's going to be a boring fight because Kyle Daukaus is going to retreat on the ground, and that's going to be the latter side of the 50-50 in Daukaus probably controlling Anders on the ground, wearing him out, probably going to decision, Kyle Daukaus winning that by decision. Now, if Anders doesn't land any power shots and Kyle Daukaus stand-up game, we could see a brawl, which I said it likely would favor Anders. But I can't discredit Kyle Daukaus's stand-up ability. So this could be a great fight. Like I said, first 3 minutes is really going to dictate this, and I really do believe this fight is going to be the latter of the 50. It's going to be a more boring fight. So I do think I'm going to give this fight to Kyle Daukaus via decision. Yeah, I think I kind of like that. I think Kyle Daukaus is going to rack up that ground control time and secure this victory here. Now that will lead up into our second fight here. Jack Hermansson taking on Roman Dolidze. Now, originally, Jack Hermansson was slated to take on Derek Brunson in this fight. Obviously, Derek Brunson pulled out with injury. Roman Dolidze steps in on a short notice. But to be honest, this is kind of, even though Dolidze took this on short notice, this is kind of a scary fight, in my opinion, for Jack Hermansson. Dolidze, even though took this fight on short notice, he's a dangerous fighter, right? He won his last three, and he has been looking absolutely scary in his last three. I feel as if Dolidze has the tools and the mindset to win fights on short notice, albeit he is fighting a top guy. But he has the power, right? He has the ground capability. My biggest deciding X factor, if you will, here is the comparison of fight IQs. I think IQ is going to come into a huge play here, and I think that's going to favor Jack Hermansson. Jack Hermansson has to analyze his risk here, right? He cannot be susceptible to power shots, nor can he be susceptible on the ground. If Jack Hermansson makes one mistake, this fight could be over. But I think Hermansson's mindset, I think his IQ is going to play a big role here. I think he's going to be able to pick apart Dolidze, especially on short notice. I would expect Dolidze to come out aggressively. Hermansson needs to withstand that. And Hermansson's going to get the win here. I don't think he's going to be able to finish Dolidze. So I kind of like Jack Hermansson here by decision as well. Unless Dolidze comes out a little too aggressive, I just don't know if Jack Hermansson is going to be taking unnecessary risks, if you want to put it in that kind of wording. I think he's going to be careful with his shots. I think he knows the danger level of Dolidze. I think he's going to be very careful. He's going to pick him apart, right? It's going to be 1-2, pick him apart, wear him down, maybe take him to the ground once or twice. Yeah, I think Hermansson here is going to take this one by decision. But I do think it's going to be an interesting fight. regardless of these being on short notice or not. Now, the next fight here, which is I'm surprised that this is actually listed as the third fight on the main card right now, because this fight here has fight of the night potential. We got two heavyweight brawlers, Tai Tuivasa taking on Sergey Pavlovich. It's going to be a great fight. Fight of the night potential. Heavyweight brawlers, heavyweight bangers. This is a fight that I would be absolutely shocked if it doesn't end in a knockout. And here's the X factor to me. This is where I believe this fight separates itself from one clear winner and one clear loser. It's going to come down to Tuivasa's speed, right? Tuivasa is deceptively quick. He's sneaky, if you will. He can land power shots in a blink of an eye. And if you're not ready for it, you're going to get knocked out. So it's going to come down to Tuivasa's speed versus Pavlovich's power. Sergey Pavlovich's power is unfreaking real. Unfreaking real. To be honest, I don't think Pavlovich is necessarily a talented fighter. Now, you can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. I don't think he's necessarily a high-level fighter. I think his power just kind of gets him through. I mean, we're talking about one-shot potential. Almost every throw, it's one-shot knockout potential. So does Tuivasa's speed outweigh Pavlovich's power or vice versa? Tuivasa's going to have to land quick strikes. Are they going to be powerful? Maybe not, but maybe you can wear Pavlovich's out. So Tuivasa landing quick strikes, avoiding power shots could get him the win here. Although, now this is another thing that I think is going to play a big factor in this fight. Is Tuivasa's health going to play an issue, right? Because he just got knocked out just about a little less than 3 months ago. And he took a lot of damage that fight. So is that going to play a factor? Is that going to make his body a little bit weaker? Is that going to make his chin a little bit weaker? That's definitely something to look to. So Tuivasa has to fight this smart and knowing the risks. And if he plays this fight smart, I think he can land a shot or two and take Pavlovich down. I'm not putting money on this fight because this fight could literally go either way. It's going to be an extremely, extremely tight fight. Like I said, I would be absolutely shocked if this doesn't end in a knockout. But I think a safe bet here isn't a fighter. I think a safe bet here is maybe under a round and a half. Maybe under 2.5 rounds if you want to be really safe. This fight doesn't go past round 2. I can guarantee you guys that. Anyway, moving on to the next fight here. Mathis Nicolau taking on Matt Schnell. And to be honest, when you look at this fight, at first I was like, okay, this fight could be domination. But I also think this fight, in my opinion, has fight of the night potential as well. Both of these fighters are extremely, extremely talented. Now, here's one problem. Is Matt Schnell, like we've seen as of recent with him, is he going to be way over aggressive? Now, in the past, he could get away with being a little bit over aggressive, right? He gets knocked down a lot, but he's a tough guy. He's been able to get away with it, and especially against that fight with Sumidarji, he was able to get away with it and still secure a victory. If he does that against Matthias Nicolau, this fight is over. And this fight could end quickly. So Matt Schnell has to be extremely, extremely careful with how he fights this fight. With that being said, Nicolau is just the better fighter. I believe Schnell would probably have to catch him off guard, catch him with a power shot, something sneaky to win this fight. Other than that, I don't really see Matt Schnell winning here. I know Nicolau's a heavy favorite, and it's a favorite it should be a lock. So I got Matthias Nicolau winning this fight. I think this is going to end in a finish as well. I do think Matt Schnell is just a little too aggressive. He's going to leave himself vulnerable. I am giving this fight to Nicolau, and you could probably parlay that with under 2.5 rounds too, due to Matt Schnell being overly aggressive. Now the co-main event here, you got Brian Barberena taking on Rafael dos Anjos. In my opinion, I think this fight has blowout potential. I think, like Matt Schnell, Brian Barberena is an extremely wildly aggressive fighter. He leaves himself extremely vulnerable, but he is tough. So just like Matt Schnell, he's been able to get away with it. But just like that Matt Schnell fight, Brian Barberena goes wildly and RDA. Fight's over. RDA is a veteran. He has that veteran mindset. He's been around for a while. RDA should be able to absolutely pick Barberena apart. Short, quick shots. Boom, boom. Literally pick him apart all fight. Maybe he lands a power shot for a knockout. Like I said, I think RDA has the potential to absolutely blow Barberena out of the water. And RDA, I believe, is one of the heavier, if not the heaviest favorites on the card. And like with Matthias Nicolau, I think that's an absolute lock. Barberena would really, really have to catch RDA with something. I just I think Barberena is going to be way too predictable. I think RDA is going to see Barberena's hands all the way. I just don't think Barberena is going to be able to crack through RDA's defense. Yeah, I really don't see Barberena winning this fight. I think it's going to be complete and utter domination by RDA. Rafael dos Anjos is going to win that fight. Will it go to? I think it does have potential to go to decision. You know, here's a bold prediction for you. I can also see Barberena wearing out the gas tank, RDA hitting him with one shot, not necessarily knocking him down, but Barberena just sitting down and the fight's over. Kind of like win via exhaustion, if you will. I don't know why. I just have that weird possibility in my mind that that can definitely happen, especially with how wildly aggressive Barberena is. The RDA is going to dominate that fight, and that's going to lead into the main event. Now, this main event, Stephen Thompson versus Kevin Holland. You want to talk about a legit brawl possibility? I talked about a few fight of the night potentials. Your main event here could easily win fight of the night. This is going to be a striker's delight, a striker's extravaganza. This is an early Christmas present to those who like stand-up fights. At least it should be. Only way it isn't is if Kevin Holland utilizes his wrestling game and tries to control Thompson on the ground. I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're going to see stand-up match here. I think we're going to see an exciting, exciting main event here. Now, here's an interesting stat that I don't normally go over, but this stat's going to have an extremely tremendous effect or impact on this fight, and that's Stephen Thompson having a 2-inch leg reach advantage. Now, for those of you who don't know Stephen Thompson, he is extremely dangerous with his kicks. Extremely dangerous with his kicks. And he will have a 2-inch leg reach advantage. That's going to play a huge, huge role. Stephen Thompson, obviously older. He's been in the sport for a while. As long as he can maintain that distance, which I think he might be able to do, he's going to pick Kevin Holland apart, and his legs are going to play a huge role. Now, are we going to see Kevin Holland try to close that distance and attack the legs with a little bit of his own? A high possibility. Look for Kevin Holland to try to close that distance and attack the legs, maybe go for takedowns. Yeah, I think this could turn into a fight where Kevin Holland might just have trouble trying to find his distance because of Stephen Thompson's legs. With that being said, I do believe Kevin Holland is extremely hungry for a win. He's coming off of that extremely frustrating loss to Hamzat Chimaev, which sparked a short-lived retirement. So is Kevin Holland's hungriness going to outweigh Stephen Thompson's legs? That's my X factor for this fight. And this is an extremely, extremely tough fight for me to predict. Now, for those of you who don't know, I kind of predict fights on the spot on this show. I just think it's funner for me as I'm reading, my notes here. So this one's actually really tough for me to pick. And I kind of like Stephen Thompson here, man. He's the underdog. It's a tough fight for him. I just think his legs are going to be a little too much for Kevin Holland. Yeah, I kind of like the underdog here. Will that's if Stephen Thompson wins, will that spark another, retirement for Kevin Holland? I don't know. But I do like Stephen Thompson. I think his legs are going to outweigh Kevin Holland's hungriness, especially with that 2-inch leg advantage. So let's mark in Stephen Thompson as the winner here for my prediction. But we will find out on Saturday night. I cannot wait to get to this card. This is an absolute banger of a fight night, guys. Do not miss it. It's free. Early prelims on ESPN. Main card on ESPN Plus if you guys have it. It's going to be a great card. Great card. Great free. Well, if you want to count ESPN Plus as free, it's a great free card for you guys to catch if you're not doing anything. But that is going to do it for this week's episode of Fist First. Guys, please tune in on Saturday for the fight. Come back on Monday night with me. I'm going to be breaking down, I'm going to be reviewing all the action. I'm going to be talking about some implications. Cannot wait for Saturday, guys. As always, thank you so much for watching. It's good to be back here at Fist First, and I am excited to just keep providing you guys more content on a regular basis here after a few of my vacations. I'm ready to get back into it weekly, twice a week, one preview, one review. But guys, yeah, thank you as always. And please don't forget to hit that like, follow, subscribe button. I will catch you guys back here on Monday night.